Hello, SJD here. This will be part 3 in a series looking at cornerstones, and I'll be focusing on this cornerstone and this particular building and those connected with it. This is the master building, as it's called, or the master apartment building is another name, on Riverside Drive in New York, and it has some really interesting connections. So there, the cornerstone 1929. Master apartment, and I'm pretty sure that this R stands for Rorik. Now even the three dots around the circle, very interesting. Now cornerstones usually, well, apart from having especially very typical to have a Masonic ceremony connected to it, but the cornerstone will often have a hollow piece for a time capsule. Now another altar stones in very important churches, cathedrals, also require a relic in there, and if you're not familiar with the Shakespeare equation or the barcode, I'll try to remember to put that in a link to that in the description as well, because he talks about the church and the altar stone, and he did pulled an awesome magic trick to be able to run some equipment across the altar stone there in the church Avon, where the Shakespeare had, Shakespeare, the altar stone there. That link will also be in the description, because it's whatever else, it's an awesome job that he did to get himself into the church and to be able to examine the stone in brilliant stuff in plain sight, as they say. Awesome magician's trick, so to speak. But this cornerstone and the master building in New York City, why is it so important to so many people? Have examined that, but what's inside this cornerstone? This is a very interesting connection. Now I'll put the link in the description to a video I did a while back. It was I did a whole series on New York and all the connections there, the architects and the buildings, but also how the movie Ghostbusters, the original proper good movie, had some awesome hints. So if you remember, there was Ivor Sandor. He was this mystical architect, and the building itself that was featured in Ghostbusters had all sorts of connections to, let's just say, mystical orders and stuff. Now that was fictional, and there was a whole near catastrophe. But as is so often the case, there's at least a grain of truth in what they were talking about in the particular building they were focusing on Ghostbusters. That link will be in the description. And these people, Einstein, Roosevelt, now I forget this architect's name, very important architect. He did Bush Tower in New York and many others. George Washington, Freemasonic Memorial was also one of his. I can't remember the name off the top of his head. But this character, especially Nicholas Rorik, and he will be especially Einstein, Roosevelt, and Rorik will be looking here. So just quickly to go through that Ghostbusters video. So this is the scene from the movie, and in the movie it was 550 Central Park West, as the Ghostbusters called it, Spook Central, with all this weird metallurgy and design. Essentially, in the movie it was to be a mystical cosmic antenna. However, this is here on the left of that is 55 Central Park West, the real building, and you see it doesn't quite match. But on the other side, here we have the master building, or master apartment building. That's also a picture of it on Riverside Drive. And this building and the architect and those featured, those directly connected to it, very closely match what was the story in Ghostbusters. You can see it's actually, the Ghostbusters building is a fusion of these two. Now, I won't go into the numbers, but I'll mention that it's got all the very special numbers and measurements in there. It's very both Central Park West and the master building, and if you blend them together again, you get a lovely coincidental storm of all the lovely numbers, as they're called. Of course, just a coincidence, because they don't do these things, even though they just randomly fall on these very special set of numbers, which connected to all sorts of other ancient units of measure, which are also on the very special set of harmonic numbers and all the geometric, arithmetic, astronomy, music connections that come through it. But of course, nothing to see here. But this video, the link will be in the description to this video. So yeah, you see it's actually a fusion of those in the movie 550 Central Park West, the actual building 55 Central Park West. So that's the actual building. If you remember the movie, the big marshmallow man stood on the church. So there's no mistaking that was, but in the movie they just turned it into that other variety, Spook Central. So there you see the movie scene, just that's what the church, and the church there just before the big marshmallow man. If you zoom in, as you know, if you see 550 Central Park West instead of 55. Okay. Now, what's interesting about the actual real building is the connection between Jesuits, Freemasons, and Theosophy. Also Rosicrucians. They're all coming together around very important people, very important features in this building, the real building. Now, Nicholas Roerich is a famous artist, architect, and mystic as well, and he was especially very strong connections. He was a theosophist. The original building was essentially built for him, and it housed the Roerich Museum originally. He then had a falling out with his patrons and moved the museum somewhere else, but this was the initial location of the Roerich Museum. It was basically built for him. This guy, really powerful patrons, built the museum for him. Here are some features. Now, the link in the description, I'll put another one in regards to Louis Buff Parry, and his strong connections to the intelligence world, and did some amazing research. I'll put that link in the description to quite a long documentary, but really encourage you to watch it and look at it, because he was examining what was in this particular box. That was so that's Nicholas Roerich's wife, and this was their treasured possession. And we see this box, this truncated pyramid, and how important it is to the Roerichs and how they got to it. And again, you need to watch the link in the description to the fuller documentary. Really is a must-watch, because we're bringing in Rosslyn Chapel, possible Templar connected navigation to America pre-Columbus, which brings us back to Rosslyn Chapel, which has these plants carved in there, which a botanist has identified as medicinal plants used by Native Americans, and they were carved in place in the Rosslyn Chapel before the New World was discovered, so to say, as they say, by Columbus. So, okay, now I couldn't find the original one. This documentary's been reposted. It's a watermark by UFO TV, but they were not the producers. I don't believe so. And Lost Secrets of the Illuminati might turn some off, but it is a very interesting, very serious documentary, and they won't. Yeah. So again, this link is in the description. Must watch. And again, because he mentions Rosslyn Chapel, and this altar stone, this cornerstone, and Jesuits, Masons, Theosophy, and Roerich, and some really strange happenings in the Roerich building. Yeah, Louis Buff Parry. Now, the focus of that documentary is the Shepherd's Monument, and decoding some very unusual inscriptions here, and the art. Again, you need to watch the documentary to get the full detail of it, but it's interesting because they dropping hints or dropping codes in there, and you just follow. You have the money, the people, the organisations. It all comes around. He also mentions how intelligence agencies in the Americans and Israelis and others are so interested in collecting ancient artifacts and looking at those things. Now it's very interesting. He himself is embedded in this world. He's not just some random guy. He has strong connections, and it was essentially through the Rosicrucians and eventually at the end to the Rosicrucians that this decoding of this particular, especially this inscription here, which was the most mysterious of the enigma surrounding the Shepherd's Monument and Nicholas Roerich and the Master building in New York. Now, the cornerstone ceremony itself was not a large-scale event, but the people in attendance were a who's who of really important people. Now, even a letter from Albert Einstein was read, which praised Nicholas Roerich's goal and the building itself. Max Planck was also connected and a supporter of this movement. Now, what is the movement? Now, the name's been changed, but it was originally called the Roerich Pact, signed in 1935, an international treaty on the preservation of ancient artifacts. Now, Nicholas Roerich, who saw the destruction from World War I and how many artifacts, pieces of art were lost, architecture was destroyed, and the Roerich Pact, again, an international treaty named after Nicholas Roerich. This is no small potatoes. The people connected, it's really talking the highest levels, and which only gives credence to Louis Parry and what he's talking about, the interest of intelligence agencies, high levels of government, really, really rich, important patrons and people who are orbiting this general area. And so this cornerstone especially. And yeah, Nicholas Roerich Pact. It's got another more, but anyway, theosophy, artifacts, and big money, big serious people. This is not just some small thing. Now here's a picture that's Louis Horch, Freemason, highly, reasonably highly ranked Freemason, very rich, important character, and that's his wife. There is Roerich's son. But anyway, Roerich, Masons, Theosophy, Louis Horch financed this building. To have a building built for you, and at the time a very important, architecturally significant building, the first building that, for instance, to have corner windows, but it's 444 feet, 27 floors, and especially at the time, this is a big thing. This is really, and so why was Roerich so important? Why was his cornerstone so important? Well, again, you need to watch the documentary, but Frank Horch, the son of Louis Horch, was the building manager, and he was murdered in the boiler room, in the basement of this building, the master building, and that boiler room is directly behind the cornerstone of this particular building. So I mentioned altar stones have relics, time capsules in cornerstones. What was in this cornerstone and what made it so important to so many very important, influential people? Well, they're also connected. So essentially what Louis Parry is presenting, and there's quite the Jesuits, the Masons, Theosophists are all very interested in this cornerstone, and there is suggestions that he was murdered in the boiler room just behind his cornerstone because someone, and he points the finger at the Jesuits, were trying to get to the relic or the time capsule of this cornerstone. Well, he said, and again, he will bring in Rosslyn Chapel, and he'll show a particular pillar and highlight this and talk to the caretaker at Rosslyn Chapel, which have got, for instance, Da Vinci Code. It's one of those, at the very end, everyone meets up at Rosslyn Chapel. It's still one of these very mysterious, influential places, but they're suggesting that this box, which is probably now in the cornerstone, contains what is to believe the pillow stone of Jacob. So in Genesis, as mentioned, Jacob went to sleep using a stone as a pillow, and then he had a dream, and Jacob's ladder basically was talking to the older prophets, and through Jacob's, so Jacob's pillow stone and Jacob's ladder. It's in few mentions of it in the Old Testament. Very important. So again, you see Jacob, the pillow stone, Jacob's ladder, and it's also an important feature in tracing boards and Freemasonry, for instance. So boards will have this ladder here. That's Jacob's ladder. And so again, you'll see this is a standard feature, Jacob's ladder, always leading to the all-seeing eye, or the sunburst as well. Jacob's ladder. Got the key here as well now. I've got to be okay. But anyway, Jacob's ladder. It's a thing. Not at least. Yeah. Okay. This is William Blake again. Pillar stone of Jacob. Jacob's ladder. just some other, again. Okay, so yep, the pillow stone of Jacob, Jacob's ladder, in both the biblical sense and still connected now, especially to this very interesting cornerstone. Or Jacob's ladder, also you might have heard of that. That's this in electronics, and yeah, just building it. That's the Jacob's ladder when you see it go up, doing that zap 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 thing. Also a very cool movie going back to the 80s as well, but that doesn't really go into this. But anyway, still just called Jacob's ladder, which brings us back to the master apartment building, Nicholas Roerich Museum, which is now moved because there was a falling out. So if you just, I'll put the link as well to, even the Wikipedia article talks about the history and the falling out between the Roerichs and the Horch family, and who were the financiers of this building. Again, who, they built, this guy's got to have some influence to have a museum and a building essentially built for him, and of course how it also matches the plot in the Ghostbusters story. So yeah, links in the description to the Lapis Exilis documentary with Louis Parry, which also mentions, who talks about the Shepherd's Monument and Rosslyn Chapel, the international treaties, the intelligence agencies, and he himself has contacts with them. So, and he is a decoder as well, so cryptography, and because he decrypts or presents, so the Horch family, the financiers, theosophy, this, what is this, what's in the box, why are so many people interested in it, why is it so, such a international influence of particularly Nicholas Roerich, the money, and all these, basically Max Planck and Einstein were the the high priests at the time, and and Rosicrucians, and so it was especially this inscription which Louis Parry claims to have found the meaning to, and again, the pillow stone of Jacob and Rosslyn Chapel. Yeah, it's really interesting stuff in regards to cornerstones, and also I did like one on a couple of videos, especially on how phi is embedded in so much of mainstream movies and TV series, and J.J. Abrams as well. I'll put the link in that description. Yeah, J.J. Abrams, because he's in plain sight, as they say, and it's, for instance, the series Alias, which he did, which was about the intelligence world and them collecting old relics as well. So it nicely fits in to real world events, and big money, big connections. So, okay, Esoterics of Ghostbusters, J.J. Abrams, I made those, I'll put those in the description, but especially the one by the documentary filmed around Louis Parry, really, really, it's worth watching, worth looking into, and of course it connects to Jesuits, Theosophy, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, cornerstone ceremonies, and big, big money, big, very powerful, influential people. And okay, anyway, the computer's not playing. It's freezing up, but anyway, hope you enjoyed. Have a good one. Especially, I'll put that link at the top of the description. That's the one you really, really need to watch. Have a good one.